Good evening, everybody, and welcome to Hunterston District Council Development Management Committee meeting. I would like to make you aware that this meeting is being live streamed via the Council's YouTube channel. Please ensure that any mobile phones are switched to silent. So welcome to those who are watching at home. I would also like to outline some housekeeping arrangements. If you wish to speak, please indicate to do so to myself. To enable your microphone, please press the middle button, which will turn green, and the microphone will light up red at the top to indicate that this has happened. Please remember to press the middle button when you have finished speaking, as it is particularly important that all members use their microphone so that the audio can be picked up through the live stream. In the event of a fire alarm sounding during the meeting, please stand and follow the meeting administrator to the evacuation point outside of the building. Firstly, do we have any apologies for absence? No, everybody's here.
There's no apologies, Chair.
Fantastic, thank you. So we will move on to item 1, which is approving the minutes as a correct record for our last meeting. All those who approve these minutes, please could you raise your hands? Thank you, they're approved. We will move on to item 2 on the agenda, which is members' interest. Are there any members that would like to declare an interest in relation to any item on the agenda this evening? Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd like to declare an interest on item 3C as I'm the local county councillor.
Thank you. Councillor McAdam.
Thank you. I would like to declare a non-registrable interest in item 3B as I'm a member of the Town Council and was not involved in this decision at all, in their decision. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. The same would apply to me. Item 3B as I'm a member of the Town Council, but I wasn't involved in making the decision on this.
Thank you very much. Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. With respect to 3B, I am a ward councillor in Huntingdon, albeit not the ward councillor covering the particular site. So this is in an abundance of caution. I'm not a member of the Town Council either. So just to be safe, Chair.
Thank you very much. Okay, we will move on to item 3A on the agenda, which is going to be presented to us by our planning officer, Lewis Tomlinson.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, everyone. So the first item is Manor Farm, Bull Lane, Broughton, and it's for the erection of a grain store, associated hard standing and new vehicle access. This application has been referred to committee because it offers a recommendation of refusal. It's contrary to the Parish Council recommendation of approval. The application has been submitted by 42 Farming Limited Liability Partnership in respect to their site known as Manor Farm, Broughton. The farm itself is accessed off Bull Lane, Broughton, but the site for development is located approximately 500 metres southeast of Broughton Lane, close to its junction with Causeway Roads. In terms of constraints, the site is classified as Grade 3 agricultural land and falls within the Central Claylands landscape character area. Aspects of this character area include gentle, undulating, arable farmland and large-scale field pattern with few hedgerows or hedgerow trees, giving rise to predominantly open landscape. The boundary with the Broughton conservation area lies approximately 180 metres to the northwest. Whilst there's a number of listed buildings, mainly Grade 2, the closest listed building is 275 metres away. There's no protected trees, and the site is within flood zone 1, which is generally low risk of flooding from general sources. So you can see the site in front of you. It's outlined in black. This aerial image of the site, so you can again see in yellow outline. This is a view taken from the road, so you can see the site is just access to the site is just to the left of the tree. This is a wider view of the landscape and where the building would be sited. And again, looking towards the junction of Brelton Lane, Causeway Road, and the application sites to the right, and clearly visible next to the tree. And then this is looking the other way along the roads, so the access to the site will just be on the left. And another photo just showing the wider landscape area of the application site. So if I just move forward. So the proposal is for the erection of a grain store, associated hard standing and new vehicular access. The building will be 30 metres wide, 24 metres deep, with eaves of 7 metres and a ridge height of 9.8 metres. Members should note officers received a letter from the local MP asking for clarification on the status of the application. Officers responded late last week advising it's being heard tonight and will update the MP's office of the outcome tomorrow. So I'll just run through the proposed plans. So you've got the site plan in front of you. So you can see the building just here. You've got hard standing around it. There is a water basin and some screening in terms of landscaping, but that's outside of the red line, but within the blue line. And you can just see the access point is here. This is the proposed floor plan for the building, a standard agricultural building layout, roof plan, side elevation, so northeast elevation, northwest elevation, southeast elevation, and southwest elevation. So this is the elevation that faces onto the road. This is a street scene view, just showing with the landscaping in front, the trees. So the officer recommendation is to refuse for the following reasons. So reason 1, the proposed development by virtue of its siting and scale would be visually harmful to the character and appearance of the surrounding countryside location, which is contrary to policies LP10B, LP11, LP12, and there is insufficient justification for its siting. It is therefore contrary to LP19, particularly parts E, F, and H. Further, it is contrary to paragraphs 85 and 174B of the NPPF 2021 and parts B2, C1, L1, L2, and L3 of the National Design Guides. So on this slide, you can just see some of the images you've already seen, just to highlight its visual impact. So you can see it's closely sited to the roads. There's limited screening from the roads. It's quite flat, arable land, get long distance views. It's a large scale agricultural building in quite a prominent location. So that's the justification for reason 1. So reason 2 is highway safety. This application fails to demonstrate a proposal would not result in highway safety dangers. In the absence of details of the proposed access width, visibility displays, tracking, and details of the number and type of vehicles proposed to service the site, etc., it has not been possible to establish if the proposed development can provide a safe and suitable vehicle access, which would not result in highway safety dangers. The proposal is therefore contrary to policy LP17 of the local plan and paragraph 111 of the NPPF. So the proposed site access would be on a 60-mile-per-hour road. The highways team at Cambridgeshire County Council have objected to the application on grounds of insufficient information, pretty much for the reasons that we've just read out and the reason for refusal. You can just see a few images on the screen. You can see it's not a wide road. There are passing places. It's quite tight. You've got large vehicles that would most likely service this agricultural building, and therefore you need decent visibility displays, turning area, etc. Without that, it's insufficient information to demonstrate it wouldn't have an impact on highway safety. So reason 3 is drainage. So the application fails to demonstrate that increased impermeable area of the site can be satisfactorily drained without increasing flood risk on site or elsewhere. Insufficient rainfall data has been provided and incomplete hydraulic calculations have been provided. The proposal is therefore contrary to policies LP5 and LP15 of the local plan and paragraph 167 of the NPPF. So the proposal includes a large building in the hard standing area. The lead local flood authority at Cambridge County Council have objected to the application on grounds of insufficient information, incomplete rainfall data, and incomplete hydraulic calculations, which they measure the performance of the system for a range of summer and winter storm durations. That's it. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. We have 4 speakers for this particular application. Our first speaker is Councillor O'Donovan from Broughton Parish Council. Welcome, and thank you for joining us this evening. When you're ready, you have 3 minutes. If you press the middle button, and then hopefully you should be able to speak.
Right. Good evening, everybody. Michael O'Donovan, Chairman, Broughton Parish Council. I'm here to represent the council as such, and the points that the planning officers come up with, drainage, visual impact and traffic, we did consider at the parish council meeting as well. Also, I went to great lengths to point out LP10 about the countryside, the fact that we do live in a farming community as such, and the building itself would not be unusual to see. We also considered LP19 about the rural economy, where we all have a duty to protect the environment and the countryside and so on. And I'll be very brief, but I just want to assure you that we did discuss it. It was a majority decision from the council itself. And I would use an analogy, if you will permit, that the LPs are exact. They're a bit like computers in as much as they're black and white and they make decisions. Whereas we as human beings and as the parish council are better than computers because we can use judgment. And I would just like to ask the councillors to consider that we did that and used our judgment. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for this particular speaker? There are no questions. Thank you for joining us.
Righto.
Our next speaker for this particular application is Councillor Charlotte Lowe, our district councillor. Welcome.
Hello, thank you for allowing me to speak tonight. I am here in support of the application. As my colleague before me said about being countryside and farm business, we do need to support them, especially in this day and age with farming in international farming and everything else. The parish council consideration was long and deliberate. I was at the meeting and concluded support for the proposal as least worst option. The constraints of the existing farmyard, from what I understand, are the heritage issues or interests, neighbouring listed building and being a conservation area, public rights of way, traffic concerns and potential impact with residential amenity. I believe the other site was closer to the village and would incorporate more vehicle movement through the village, which we've got listed buildings and conservation area would have impact on that as well. The new building is typical of others built in the open countryside and being permitted by HDC, and the applicant has worked to address technical concerns. It's required to support the growth and expansion of this rural business and is essential for the long-term sustainability of the business. As we've been seeing a lot recently, that farmland is being used for housing development, and I know the parish is against more building developments. The visual display will be limited for the time being, obviously because it's summer, but it will be given time to grow and hide the building, and he has taken all consideration for making it as aesthetically appealing as possible. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor. Are there any questions for this particular speaker? Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you for addressing us this evening. And I think, if I may say, you and your parish council representative before you have certainly made, certainly made an argument with a significant degree of passion as to why this application you feel should be approved rather than rejected per the recommendation before us in the report. I wouldn't wish to try to draw you into an overly technical planning sort of policy argument on this, but I would find it really helpful just to understand whether the basic case, as you understand it from yourself and indeed on behalf of the parish council as well, is that the local plan policies can be interpreted in a way that makes this proposal in accordance with those policies, or is the argument more that you accept that it doesn't, but feel that the policies sort of aren't appropriate to the context? Is there a planning policy argument that says we should feel able to approve this based on the policies before us, for example, those quoted in the officer's report, or are you urging us to set those aside on some basis?
I can't really answer that, if I'm honest. I don't know all the planning policies, but I can't see the issues that have been commented on. I know it's a 60-mile-an-hour road. I travel on that quite often, and I've never done 60. I usually do about 20. And given the size of the vehicles, you will be able to see them, and they won't be going 60 miles an hour down that road. It's quite impossible to do that, although I expect young drivers would probably be able to manage it somehow. Does that answer your question?
As much as it might, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for Councillor Lowe? No, there are no more questions. Thank you very much for addressing us, Councillor Lowe. Our next speaker on this particular application is Dr. Badger, who is an objector to this particular application. Welcome.
Yeah. Thank you very much. Firstly, I want to acknowledge that I am speaking on behalf of a group of residents of Broughton who have objected to the proposal. And secondly, I want to thank the members of the committee here today who have come in person to Broughton to inspect the site of the proposed barn, seeing both what agricultural buildings are available and currently in use, alongside seeing Broughton Lane and the proposed site. Hopefully, this has made some of the objections that we've raised a little bit more self-evident. So as residents of Broughton, we have obviously brought into a rather unique and increasingly rare conservation village, where historic and listed farmsteads sit within and just outside the village boundary, farmed by successive generations. Broughton Lane itself is the only remaining undeveloped single-track country lane to Broughton. It has one passing lane and verges that indicate formal conservation designations as special sites of scientific interest. Our objections are to the significant precedent of building on this lane. At 30 by 24 metres with a ridge height of 9.8 metres, this barn is excessive in size for the exposed and undeveloped special interest countryside location. As witnesses to the annual rhythms of harvest, we know this barn is also excessive for the yield of this relatively small farm. Given the land grade rating, the current model of rotating crops and best practice return to mixed farming, the current barn at Bull Lane, built just over 30 years ago, is determined unfit for purpose. It could arguably be modified by a small percentage. Maintenance work on gutters, roof and doors would be welcomed to see this farmstead continue to accommodate current yield and future use. And there is also another footprint which was mentioned, which is outside of the village on the farm, that with a similar investment of hard standing and building could also be a justifiable alternative. Attempts to shelter the excessive scale of building with planting visualise mature trees that the reality of planted whips is unlikely to replicate before this barn is also deemed to be unfit for agricultural use. And many in Broughton live in the shadow of flood risk and are concerned about the consequences of such an excessive building on our community flood threat. While situated on the outskirts of the village, its location and turning circles for access to Broughton Lane itself mean that this location is far more likely to increase heavy farm machinery traffic through the village and bring increased risks to road and to walker safety. So while we wholeheartedly support the farming community we are part of, we question why we are needing new barns to be built on new greenfield sites and on new footprints, when at the same time in Broughton, we are repeatedly seeing permitted development of these barns for residential houses, justified by claims that the barns are no longer needed or are unfit for purpose. We have seen this at Illings Farm, at Mill Barn Farm, and the current approved application for 3 houses at Lodge Farm. This application fails to justify the location, the site, and the necessity for carving out a new footprint in this location or for any sustainable aspiration for farming or the community. It clearly fails to meet many of the policies as we've seen in our local plan. Thank you very much for letting me speak.
There we go. Thank you very much, Dr. Badger. Are there any questions for this particular speaker? Councillor Davenport-Ray?
Thank you for coming to talk to us in person. When you're describing the site, you used a particular phrase, special interest countryside location. Is that because you know of a site of special scientific interest, or are you describing the special characterized landscape that the officers have included in their report?
Thanks for your question. I think there's a number of elements to that. So we've already seen that the proposal was referred to a number of specialists, including archaeologists, including conservation. We're fine. Archaeology have put a condition on if this was to be approved, but also it is recognised, Broughton Lane is specifically recognised as being an exemplar of the claylands according to the local plan. So, and it also has verges of special scientific site interest along Broughton Lane. So I'm acknowledging all of those aspects of the site.
Thank you. Councillor Butler?
Thank you, Chairman. You say that the barn is too big for the acreage that the farmer farms. Can you tell me what that acreage is?
As I understand it, it's 300. Is that right? 300. So if you do a crude calculation, I think you would find that, yes, a barn would service that, but certainly what came out at the parish council meeting is that the current yield is just a little bit more than the current barn use. So certainly the current yield did not seem to equate to the justification for the size of this barn. That's what came out in the discussion in the parish council meeting. And I think you'll find that's also in the planner's report, there's discussion of that.
Are there any other questions for this particular speaker? No other questions, so thank you very much for joining us this evening. We have one more speaker, which is, well, the agent and the applicant. We have Lucy Charnock and Andrew Middleditch. Thank you. You have 3 minutes in which to address the council, and when you're ready, you can press the middle button.
Thank you. This application is made on behalf of a family-run farming partnership seeking to invest in their business and future-proof it for long-term sustainability. It involves the erection of a modern grain store of conventional design and typical of other buildings you will find across Huntingdonshire and within the Central Claylands, many of which will have been erected as permitted development. It also reflects a common scenario for a farm business having to relocate their operating base out of a village where the conflict and constraints of operating within a residential setting are simply not practical. The applicants have sought to find an alternative unconstrained site for their new crop store. The consultation responses confirm that this is an appropriate site for this type of development, and we are appreciative of the parish council's dutiful consideration, which has reached a similar conclusion. We are, however, disappointed that the application is presented to you with highways and drainage as apparently unresolved issues. It is in fact the case that these issues are not unresolved. We have submitted further information to address the consultee responses, and this was available to the case officer at the time that his report was written. The information provided additional clarification and was not an amendment. Further dialogue with Highways confirms that they are now satisfied. The technical points raised by the Lead Flood Authority have been addressed. Unfortunately, none of this has been reported to you. This is a carefully considered proposal, and you can be sure that it is a technically suitable site for this type of development. Any remaining concerns that you may have can be dealt with by condition. You can similarly be assured that it is simply not practical or suitable to provide this type of facility on the site of the existing grain store in the village. Your own policies speak of the need to support a healthy rural economy in the same way that the NPPF encourages the growth and expansion of rural businesses. This proposal is consistent with that approach. I would now like to introduce you to Lucy Charnock, who can speak on behalf of the family of the need for this building.
Thank you for allowing me to speak. My sister and I are the third generations of Gowlets to farm the Broughton land of Manor Farm, which has been in the family for nearly 70 years. We have a strong emotional tie to the land and local environment and feel great responsibility to carefully consider the needs of the village and any impact changes may make. Formerly a mixed arable and livestock farm with large acreage given over to grassland, we have evolved to meet changing demands and now plan to grow a single crop across all 300 acres. Cereals are best produced here, with wheat the most reliable crop on our land, reaping a harvest of at least 1,400 tonnes. The current grain store, built nearly 30 years ago, has capacity for only 350 tonnes, less than a quarter of what we need. In addition, this store is too small to accommodate modern farm machinery and tipping trailers and is not compatible with modern farm storage standards. It is located centrally in the village, near to a listed building and heritage site, and is accessed via a narrow lane. We have considered rebuilding in the current location, but there are many restrictions, not least the public footpath running across the front of the building, which limits location. There are no other suitable sites on the farm, as all would be subject to the same concerns as this application, but with far greater visual impact, as endorsed by the Parish Council decision. All the farm's land is good agricultural grade, so with local planning guidelines in mind, we have carefully chosen a site utilising the least productive area, tucked close to the village, and which has better access, thus removing lorry movements in the residential area. There could be over 100 combined vehicle movements as the crop is harvested and a further 40 to transport it onwards. Yes. Okay. In making this application for an essential building on the farm, we simply seek to future-proof the business and ensure the livelihoods of those who work with us, all of whom are based in the local area. The building is of standard size, is acceptable in planning terms and meets regulatory guidelines, so there's no reason to refuse this request.
Thank you. Are there any questions for this particular applicant? Councillor Sanderson.
That's fine. The applicant or applicant's agent in his remarks said that County Council Highways are now satisfied with this application, but I don't think that's something that has been made known to our officer team. So could we seek some clarification from you on that?
Yes, certainly. We've had email confirmation from Highways that they're happy. Their request was merely to provide a plan which illustrated on it all of the features that we'd agreed to provide in terms of visibility displays and the like and tracking. It was sent to your officers. They haven't sort of considered it or reported on it, but we sent it to Highways as well, who have confirmed by email to us that they're happy with it. It's a matter that could have been dealt with by condition in any event, but our position is that Highways are happy.
I'd like to bring in our planning officers.
Chair, can I come in on that? Just a point, as we have at the present no amendments schedule, so when there is an application with some in-principle issues with regards to recommendation, which was associated with the information as submitted, we don't reconsult associated with new additional information that is received. Therefore, the application additional information has not been consulted on, so therefore we don't have a recommendation to put to you. which would say that the highways and LLFA information is correct or acceptable.
Thank you.
Can I respond to that, please? Is that possible? I mean, the information we submitted wasn't an amendment. It was additional information that Highways had requested clarification. So we're disappointed that within the period of time that that information has been with the officer, that they couldn't have simply got the confirmation from Highways that Highways have provided to us.
Thank you. Our planning officer has given us our opinion from the planning side. I have some more questions for you. Councillor Brereton, you had a question for this particular speaker.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned in your bit that this is a new operation base for the farm. We've got it down as planning as a grain store. So is it an operational base or is it a grain store, please?
It's an application for a grain store. I think the reference to operational base was something that came from your officers with reference to where the existing grain store is. Now, the existing grain store is in the village off Bull Lane, next to a listed building within a conservation area. It's a constrained site. The building, as Lucy's explained, is not fit for purpose in terms of modern needs. It doesn't provide the capacity of storage that's required. It hasn't got the height for access for modern tipping trailers. It needs to be replaced. But to replace it on the site of the existing grain store would have far greater impact than the site that we've chosen, which has got conservation have said that it's acceptable from a conservation point of view. Obviously, the parish looked at it in a lot of detail and concluded again that it was the best or the least worst option in terms of sites.
So is this going to be an operational base instead of the one in the village, or is it going to be a grain store?
It is a grain store. I mean, it is a replacement grain store. I don't know quite what you interpret by the word operational base, but that will be the centre of the farm in terms of its grain storage.
Just that you mentioned operational base, not the officer. Another question.
Councillor Brereton, could I just bring in for clarification our planning officer on that particular point?
Thank you, Chair, through you. So I think what's being referred to here is LP19. So LP19 talks about whether developments happen outside of the existing operational site. I think that's kind of just been a mix-up between base and site. So the report refers to the operational site being at the farmsteads. So this is why we've assessed it under the part of the policy, which is for outside the operational site. So I think it's just a term that's used in LP19, but my understanding it's for a grain store, and that's how we've assessed it.
Thank you. Councillor Goulson.
Thank you, Chair. I've got three questions. What services will be required at sites? It does look as if there might be collectors on the roof and so on, but what welfare facilities will be required if you've got up to 100 vehicle movements and so on for travel? Are there welfare facilities? And you talk about 100 vehicle movements. What size of vehicles are these we're talking about, please?
In terms of welfare facilities, there are no additional specific facilities to be provided. The floor plan doesn't suggest that there's going to be any toilets. The grain store will be merely used as a building to receive crops when they're tipped there, and then for those crops to be removed at some point during the preceding season. In terms of vehicles, the size of vehicles, I mean, they will be standard tipping trailers. So in terms of the crop that is put in there, it'll probably be a tractor pulling a tipping trailer, and then a lorry to take the grain away. I can't give you the precise dimensions of those lorries, other than to say that in the tracking information that we've provided, the site has been laid out in such a way that it can accommodate the vehicles that will need to go into and out of that site, and the road layout accommodates that similarly.
Thank you. Councillor Tevlin.
Thank you. My question is about the issue surrounding trees, actually, as sort of quite a big concern, particularly in the report. Is there anything, and particularly LP, is it, oh, oops, yeah, the LP, I think it's LP 31, around trees. Is there any consideration to protecting the trees that are vulnerable in the site, or has any consideration been made, or yeah, what could be done here? Thank you.
Certainly there would be no intent or desire to impact upon existing trees. In fact, they are an asset in terms of providing screening for the site, which will be supplemented by additional planting through a landscaping scheme which can be secured via condition. It's not my understanding that there's been any objection from your tree officer or the case officer on grounds of impact on trees. But again, I would expect standard conditions to ensure that trees are given adequate protection during construction works, with fencing to prevent sort of impact upon the trees during that construction phase.
Thank you very much. And we have a question from Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. You've answered a couple of the other questions. The one I'm asking is on the third one, which talks about the application fails to demonstrate that the increase in the impermeable area of the site could be satisfactorily drained. Are you saying you've been to the Lead Flood Authority and etc., and they actually are now satisfied? And you're just saying, and from a planning perspective, they're saying, I'll ask them the question. That I'm just asking you whether you've actually have sent that through from their perspective and they're satisfied with that.
I mean, the information that the Lead Flood Authority required was a use of different rainfall data in terms of from a calculations point of view, and a different outfall, which was 5 millimetres bigger than the outfall that was proposed on the drainage report that we submitted with the application. Those amendments to that report have been made in line with their recommendations. I haven't seen a letter from them saying that they are satisfied, but this is something that can be dealt with by way of condition. The attenuation facility is within the blue line area. It's within the control of the applicant. It will be designed to meet the needs of this particular building. It's in flood zone 1. It is perfectly achievable to create a facility that meets everybody's objectives in that respect.
So coming off that, Chair, my question is to officers, is that have we received that and would we be satisfied with the information that's been provided? Not as an amendment, but had it been identified initially and given in as required information?
For you, Chair. So as Julie said, we did receive information. We didn't send it out for consultation. Why? I guess there's a difference between amendments and additional information here. Both required consultations with technical consultees, where we had issues with the visual impact, reason 1. So no, we haven't formally consulted on it. So as far as we know, the objection still stands. In regards to whether it could be conditioned, that's not the advice that we've received from the Lead Local Flood Authority, who are the technical consultee for flooding.
Thank you. Councillor McAdam, you have a question.
Yeah, thank you. Could you just talk about the number of vehicle movements and over what period of time these vehicle movements would take place, please?
Sorry, harvest time, when vehicles obviously move into the buildings to deposit the crops, and in that regard, we are anticipating. Excuse me for checking my notes on this. It would have the potential to generate up to 83 movements into the store at harvest time. and 44 movements out of the store over the following months. And those are the limited times at which vehicles will be going backwards and forwards from this site. At harvest time, over a relatively short period, perhaps no more than a week, and then when the crop comes out, over a more prolonged time, to meet demand.
I just want to bring back in our planning manager.
Thank you, Chair. Just for clarification, none of the additional information that's been submitted has been sent off to the consultees. We aren't aware of what that information contains. We haven't seen the comments in terms of the County Highways recommendations in respect of any amended drawings that have been submitted by the client. So just a level of caution, members, that your statutory consultation responses have not been checked in respect of the LLFA comments and the County Highways comments. Thank you, Chair.
I respond to that. The information was submitted to your officers about a month ago. There was plenty of time without delaying.
Mr. Middleditch, you've had several questions put to you which you have answered, and you have sent through additional information which has been read by all our councillors. So I'd like to thank you for coming in and speaking to us. Thank you. Right, we will move on for questions of clarification to our officers. Are there any questions of clarification to our officers? Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you. Just looking at paragraph 6.3, it talks about the ownership of the farmhouse remaining unclear. So that doesn't have a bearing on the application, but you obviously mentioned it for a reason, haven't you? So to what extent should we take note of those comments there, Lewis?
Through you, Chair. So the officer comments are in response to some of the issues raised by third parties. It's just a different way of dealing with it. Instead of like in other matters, this officer has chosen to write it underneath the reps. So I think they're just referring back to, yes, what certificate they've submitted and the ownership. In terms of kind of the impact it has, I think the only impact it has is around LP19 when we're looking at the existing operational sites, which was referenced earlier today. And that if it's inside the existing operational site, there's a different part of LP19 to assess against, and if it's outside, there's a different part. So it's just making sure we assess the development against the correct criteria for LP19. I think in this case, existing operational site is going to be where the buildings are, kind of where the parking area, where you're most likely going to see the operational base, we could refer to it as. This is obviously, for farmland, it's quite difficult because you can't just class all fields as operational sites, because then that would be a massive area to cover under LP19. So I think we look at the buildings like a farmstead, etc. So I think all of these kind of comments around that ownership issue and where we assess it against which policy.
Councillor Niche has a question.
Thank you, Chair. I seem to recall a number of farm buildings going through, not necessarily through DMC, but in the past. And I wonder if you could advise me and clarify where it's permitted buildings for farm use on farm locations, because I thought that the majority of farm buildings were built for permitted use, and therefore they almost didn't have to go through planning. It was just, I say rubber stamp, I know it's not a rubber stamp, but literally it went through that, and why this one doesn't come under that auspices of being permitted development for use of agricultural purposes.
Through you, Chair. So I'm just checking now, but I understand it's to do with the size and constraints. So listed buildings, conservation areas, and the size of it. But if you give me a few minutes, let me just double check and I'll give you the factual. So yeah, just to add to that, it's also do the actual size of the farm area, so the site. So for example, we've got permitted development for agricultural development on units of 5 hectares or more, and then we've got agricultural development on units of less than 5 hectares. And there's a long list of kind of conditions and different bits that need to tick. But I think the main point here is that they've applied for plan permission, therefore we have to assess it against that basis. We haven't done a check in the report on kind of why it's not PD or how much it's over, so I can't advise on that at this moment.
Councillor Corney, you have a question.
Thank you, Chair. I know at County Council, it's within our gift to the planning committee there. We can actually condition traffic. Is that within our gift here? Just to sort of actually, if there was a mind to approve, we can condition that all HGVs leave the site and go directly to the A141, as opposed to keeping all traffic away from the village. The tractors obviously bringing the crops in. That's got to come from where it's working from. That's a different matter. But the HGVs, I just know if it's up within our gift.
For you, Chair, so I think members just need to be cautious here. Obviously, we've heard that information has been sent to Highways and they've said it's acceptable. Officers haven't seen that confirmation. In terms of conditions, they have to meet the 6 tests of the MPPF, and one of them is enforceable. So whether we could put a condition on, but I think the key issue here is that officers haven't seen that Highways have said it's acceptable based on that information. I don't know whether Richard, who's the legal advisor, wants to add to this, but I think in terms of any issues where you're looking at a technical issue such as highways, drainage, we rely on consultees to advise us. For us to go against the consultees' advice, we don't have the kind of expertise to do that. So I think it's just around cautious. But Richard, I don't know if you want to add to that.
Thanks, Lewis. Yeah, through you, Chair. It's more the enforceability of the condition, because it would be virtually impossible to, notwithstanding the fact we haven't seen the Highways non-objection, it's putting conditions on. We're not the Highway Authority, so it's not the kind of thing that we would be able to police, really. And you shouldn't have a make-weight condition, because make-weight conditions can be appealed.
Thank you. Councillor Davenport-Ray.
If the officer will indulge me, I have 3 questions. The first is this a brownfield site?
No, so this would be classed as a greenfield site. So brownfield site is previously developed land. This isn't previously developed.
Does this application also include a change of use?
I would say no, because it's still being used for agricultural purposes.
Okay, my final question. You have 3 reasons in the report suggested for refusal. My question is about the first, about the effect on the landscape. And I notice elsewhere in the report that we have not had feedback from the HDC Landscapes team. This seems critical given that it's one of the reasons for refusal, the grounds of there being harm to appearance of the surrounding countryside. So I'm wondering, have we received anything from that team since you've written the report? Or how should we interpret non-input from that team? Is no response meaning they haven't assessed it, or they've assessed it and there was no positives or negatives that they wanted to know?
So we did receive some informal comments from the landscape officer today, quite late. They come to the same conclusion, that's harmful. The landscape measures aren't within the red line. We haven't included it in the report because we feel like the report stands by itself. We don't normally seek landscape comments on these types of developments, and this was received quite late. But yeah, the landscape officer has come back. But no, we haven't reported that to members.
Thank you. Councillor Nish, you had a question of clarification.
Thank you. And it's probably also to legal as well, because I've flicked through again quickly, and I can't see where it's been objected to. It's just they haven't received the information. This is Highways and the Lead Flood Authority. Have they actually objected to, or is it that we're saying because they haven't received the information, therefore it's objectable because they haven't given the information?
So I know your point. Obviously, there is a difference there, but we're currently operating under no amendments. Therefore, if a consultee doesn't have all the information that they require to be able to give us advice on the proposal, then that's grounds for refusal on insufficient information. So those reasons are always very clear around kind of the reason why we're refusing it. In this case, it's insufficient information, what's lacking. For example, if this application is refused tonight, the applicant wishes to appeal, those reasons may fall away during the course of an appeal when the information has been submitted. But we are assessing the application as submitted, and the advice from the consultees are they don't have enough information to advise. That's why we've gone with the insufficient reason for refusal.
Councillor Gardner.
Oh, there we go. Can you, just for some clarity, if Highways, because we said you'd received a late response from the landscape officer, so have we checked that we have not received anything from Cambridgeshire Highways with regard to this application? Because if we have, then surely this committee should have been told what Cambridgeshire Highways' response was.
Through you, Chair. We haven't consulted the County Highways Authority in relation to the additional information that was submitted, so they won't be responding to us in relation to the additional information. We have to send it to them under a consultation before they will respond to us. So the applicant may have done some consultation himself directly with the Highways Authority and the LLFA, but we weren't party to what information was sent to the LLFA and the Highways Authority because we haven't sent it across to them. Does that make that clarification?
Councillor Corney.
Can we have a definition of an amendment then, please? Because, you know, this is, I don't know, I think this is very blurred at the moment. This is, you know, surely this is additional information or requested information, not, you know, an amendment surely is a change. Can we just sort of just clear that up, please?
Thank you, Chair. A consultation or reconsultation in relation to our amendments is any information that requires us to reconsult. Reconsultation would be a 14-day consultation with our consultees. So at present, where there are normally more than one reason for a refusal, we don't reconsult on the additional information that is submitted. We ask the applicant to withdraw the application and resubmit with the additional information as requested. I think this is the second application in relation to this site, and I believe that the similar sort of reasons were given on the first application in terms of additional information that was required.
If I may, please.
Councillor Corney.
So just on the response that you've just given to Councillor Gardner, so we haven't gone back, we didn't go to them to consult because we're saying that we didn't have the information. When the information's come available, we still haven't gone to them because we're saying it's too late. Is that the crux of it?
So I think the point here is that there's still the reason one for refusal, which is the visual impacts. If we start accepting additional information for the other reasons for refusal, then why shouldn't we accept additional information to overcome, say, reason one, for example? So I think the key point here is around no amendments, is when it's not just one issue, there's multiple issues, and it's whether those issues can be overcome by, say, just sending some additional information. If this was a different application where we're looking at kind of, it was just Highways asking for some additional information, we may, but the basic rule at the moment to ensure that we get through applications in a timely manner is to not accept amendments or further information that requires consultation. And on this application, reason one still stands, and that can't be addressed. So I guess it's a question over fairness, like where do we draw the line of what we accept? But yeah, that's the rule we've got in at the moment on the no amendments.
Are there any other questions of clarification for our planning officers? Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. Thank you. I think this was touched upon in some earlier contributions, but just for completeness, I wanted to give officers opportunity to come back specifically on the suggestion that both the highways and flooding aspects could be covered by condition. I think there was a suggestion that we don't agree with that. I'd just like to ensure we've heard that clearly, please. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. So, yeah, just to come back onto this. So both highways and drainage are technical issues. We consult Cambridge County Highways and Cambridge County Lead Local Flood Authority to advise us because we aren't experts in those fields. There's clearly a difference in opinion here between the planning agent and officers and what we can condition. At the moment, we've got outstanding objections. Yes, granted, one is on insufficient information, but we haven't been advised by those bodies that we could condition this information, and they haven't recommended that. So as officers, we've taken the expert advice from the technical consultees on those issues. That is the simple answer, that's why we consult them for their advice. We'd have to have very good reason to go against it, and in this case, there isn't very good reason to go against it.
I think that's very helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. If there are no more questions of clarification, we'll move on to the debate. Who would like to start the debate for me? Councillor Butler, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. It's a bit of a mess, isn't it? To be honest, there's not a lot of common sense involved in this. There's information out there which we need and we haven't access to because it hasn't been acted upon. It's a bit cart before the horse. It's come to us without the information we need. You know, I'm a farmer, so I know what stores hold and what they're used for, and I know traffic movements. And I'll tell you now, 100-foot by 80-foot barn is not large, as is stated in the report. It says it's excessive. It is not. 22 foot to the eaves is reasonable, probably on the low side. We run in with trailers that are 22 foot long, and you tip one of those up and see where it comes to, how close to the roof. So it's not excessive in size. This barn will hold, it'll hold 1,500 tonne. Where their original building only holds 350. It's been positioned, it was objected to the position by County Council Highways on the original plan, which came out onto the causeway. This has been moved a field back, so it now comes onto a narrow lane. So I'd worked out that there's about 50 to 60 tractor movements and probably 40 to 45 lorry movements, not all in one go. Obviously, the tractor and trailer movements will be just in the harvest period. The lorry movements could be, a couple of months or 3 a month or whatever. It comes out onto a narrow road. It doesn't go in the village. If it's conditioned that they come in from the 141 on the causeway, it doesn't go, lorries don't go into the village. So it's completely separate. I really haven't got a problem with this, and it just confuses me, it amazes me why it's come to us. We know what the applicant said. That information's out there, but we haven't got it. So how can we make a judgment when we haven't got the information that we need? And I'm just bemused by the whole thing, and I'm afraid I won't be supporting the officers on this one because we haven't got the information. Thank you.
Councillor Davenport-Ray.
So the officer's given us 3 reasons proposed for refusal. The first is on the landscape, what he's talked about a bit, and the other 2 are on highways and the Lead Local Flood Authority. I think we can use some of our experience of all the applications that we see here to know that if highways see an objection that they think can be overcome through a condition, they tell us. And they will say in the report or in their feedback, we have concerns about something, but we think that it could be addressed by a condition. We see that in many of the reports come before us. And so I would hesitate to think that, to think otherwise. And so I do feel that I can support the officer's recommendation this time around.
Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. I think we've heard this evening that notwithstanding the policy which has been adopted, as I think we all know, to assist in getting through the historic backlog of planning applications, which creates its own risks and problems when applications are very long, outstanding, which is inevitably frustrating in situations where a planning application doesn't meet requirements by not having submitted what's needed. We've heard that notwithstanding that fact, albeit in non-binding form, in practice, officers may well have disregarded that rule in order to, as Councillor Butler put it, apply common sense with respect to the second and third objections this evening. We've seen plenty of examples of that happening in other contexts. However, as the planning officer has I think, quite rightly and helpfully drawn our attention to, recommendation for refusal 1 still stands. And for me, it is an entirely coherent application of an entirely coherent, albeit potentially frustrating for applicants, policy for us to be where we are this evening. I think the assessment of this being a mess is unfair, and I hesitate to disagree with as experienced a colleague on this committee as Councillor Butler, but I disagree with his assessment of that. I think given what we have before us, plainly we're not going to be able to approve this application even if we wish to on points 2 and 3, but I think the case for refusal recommendation 1 is striking, and I haven't heard a convincing argument through our planning policy framework as to how we might regard the problems identified for us relevant to recommendation reason 1 as being somehow compatible. Colleagues will have heard I sought to elicit this from an earlier speaker, and we had a strident articulation of the planning position on behalf of the applicant by the agent, but I haven't heard how we can reconcile the problems relevant to refusal 1 with our policies, as opposed to merely wishing that the policies weren't as they are this evening. So I'm keen to hear colleagues' contributions, particularly on that point this evening. I haven't made up my mind. My mind remains open, but I have not thus far seen grounds to not refuse this purely on recommendation 1, even if refusals 2 and 3 were in fact met and all the information had been looked at and was satisfactory, and those reasons did not exist. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Goulson.
Thank you, Chair. When I visited site today, I just looked at this and I thought, for the operation that they're looking to, it's an ideal position outside the village. However, we didn't have the information from highways. We didn't have the information as to the site water. And so that was my issue there. And then further on through the meeting, we've heard that possibly this may not have needed to come as a planning application because it's an agricultural building. They could have had permitted development as a possibility. But right now, I think to say that where it was, I thought it was an ideal position for the type of movement of vehicles that are going to be in this operation. It seemed like a justified place to have this. And we should be looking to see how our planning policies fitted in with that. However, I still think that we couldn't have made a determination tonight because of the lack of information. And although I hate doing it, I'd prefer to say I propose deferring this one to get the information to let us make a proper determination on this one.
Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. We can only look at the application in front of us, and I'm afraid a lot of members have made very speculative comments about sizes of storages and what they perceive to be the transport issues here. LP10 is pretty clear, and that offers, I think, one of the clear reasons why we should go with the officer recommendation. As Councillor Wakeford said, we have a clear reason regarding the landscaping and siting of this proposed facility. And we did hear a clear explanation from our officers regarding the information from the County Council, the Local Highways Authority. We weren't privy to that information. So therefore we cannot speculate on what that information contained. We must look at what is in front of us. And I would like to propose that we accept the officer's recommendation and refuse permission for this application. Thank you.
Councillor McAdam.
Thank you, Chair. Just referring to Councillor Butler's contribution, it does concern me on this particular LP. Councillor Butler, being a farmer himself, is therefore an expert on the kind of, the sizes of buildings, etc., etc. I just feel that there's quite a big shadow of doubt here. I really don't know which way to go on this, and so I'll shut up, I think. Thank you.
Right, before we continue with the debate, I would like to come back to our planning officers about planning development rights.
Thank you, Chair, and through you. Sorry, so I just spent a bit longer actually looking up the PD rights. So the reason why the application's been submitted is because the building is larger than what they could do on the PD. So hence they do need to apply for plan permission. So just to be clear, so the building they're proposing is 720 metres squared, and they can only do 465 under permitted development. So it's considerably larger than what they could do under permitted development. So yes, while it's not contained in the report, but obviously looking at the visual impact, that's a fair size difference. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair. I think, as you can see, there's a lot of unknowns in this one, and I slightly disagree with some aspects of some of the members saying, well, we're going against what Highways have said. Highways actually haven't said anything, from what I can see, because they haven't been consulted on it. And the Leader Flood Authority, again, they haven't, from what I can see, come back to us. So that is an issue. And when we go to the first one, I look at the size and scale, and you've just astounded me, actually, because that's actually quite small, 420. Modern farming and modern machinery, they do need the much bigger size, don't they? Not that I'm an expert in any of that at all, but when you see the size of some of this stuff, you can understand that. My personal opinion is a really difficult one, because actually with the information we've got here, we have got a struggle, because actually we've got bits in there which possibly we could be talking about a splay, right? We all know, I mean, yes, it's not a 60-mile-an-hour limit, it's a decontrolled limit. It doesn't mean people have to do 60 down there, and it is a really tiny track, and I think most people would struggle, although on a larger motorbike you could probably do that. So that's one aspect, and the second one is on the flooding. Again, we know full well that the flooding on majority of cases can easily be overcome once the information has been provided. We don't know if it has been provided or not, because we've been told one that it has, one that it hasn't, and of course we've got the case here is that it hasn't been provided. For the size of it, I actually still think it's relatively okay within that location. It's a farm building. They need large farm buildings. Yes, they're utilising part of the field to utilise it. So I wouldn't have my position on one is that virtually its siting and scale, I don't think is harmful. It's a farm building. I mean, you know, if we started looking at all silos and farm buildings, we start. The problem I have is that we can't set condition because it is down to highways and it is down to Lead Flood Authority. But I also don't want to reject it because I actually think it's easily overcomable. So I'm also mindful actually ought to defer it to see if that information is acceptable and then come back. As much as I hate deferring anything because it's just putting off another debate in DMC, which could last another half an hour. But I think I almost think it's wrong to actually object to this one on information. I don't think it's amendments. To me, it's additional supporting material. To me, amendments is the barn was 720 square metres and now he's going to squeeze it up to 1,000 square metres, and a change of amendment, that to me is an amendment as opposed to supplying information which you require. So I do have a slightly disagreement on that one. So I actually believe we should be deferring this as opposed to refusing it.
I'd like to bring back in our planning officer about clarification about the amendments.
Chair, thank you, Chair. Just to be clear, in relation to a deferral, we could receive additional information and get reconsultation in relation to reasons 2 and 3. But reason 1 is not a matter of information submitted with the application. So therefore, just to be clear in terms of where we're going with regards to this. Thank you, Chair.
No. Okay. Could I just clarify with Councillor Goulson? Were you actually making a proposal? Because I didn't hear a proposal. Was that?
I don't think I said that, but I am willing to make that a proposal.
And I've also already got a proposal for refusal. Councillor Niche, what are?
I would second deferral on items 2 and 3 because my personal opinion is that actually I would support 1 anyway, but I know that's a different aspect.
Okay. And I still have Councillor Corney. You wanted to talk.
Thank you. There's also a couple of colleagues across. They've been notifying. The first reason for refusal, visual impact. I'm at versus with this because we're saying at one point it's visual. There's a visual impact here. We can see it. But then the second or third now is visibility displays, and so we can either see it or we can't. And it's even that seems to me the two reasons fight each other because it's either very visible or it's not. If we can see the building, we can see where we're going on the track. I just feel, to me, it just goes against it. But I also feel the precedent's been set elsewhere, and we're not even 2 villages away, a building more than 4 times the size of this. And I just feel, we're opening ourselves up for this because if we allow it in one place, and we can see that from a couple of villages away. So I'm of an opinion that this is the right location. It's moving the traffic away from the village. We've heard from one of the villagers that they've got the group there to protect the village. I think this is what this is doing. Sometimes we can go away from the policy. It's there as a guideline. Personally, that's my feeling. I feel that this is the right thing in the right place. There's too many things against it, to sort of say there's too many reasons against the reasons we're given for refusal. I think we've either got to defer this or vote on it. But, that's my Nothing. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Corney. Councillor Wakeford. Sorry, Councillor Muckball.
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure if I'm even allowed to do this because I thought there was a proposal on the table and then I don't know if I heard a second, but I would like to second Councillor Sanderson on his reason to refuse. I do obviously understand the concerns that Councillor Butler raised about it is messy, it is a highways issue, but we've been consulted. It's not that we haven't been. We just can't consult again. So I would like to second the proposal.
Thank you very much. I will take that second. However, we do have a deferral first, but I know Councillor Dew wanted to speak as well.
Thank you, Chair. I've been on this committee for the best part of 20 years and I've never been so confused in a single meeting. I know what we're trying to achieve by, trying to catch up on our backlog, but I think it's really backfired on us tonight. It hasn't helped us at all. And I'm speaking to the officers here because I think it could have been dealt with in a much, much better way and, brought to us. I think we're in a position now where deferral is the only real option. I'm loath to have a debate around, as much as some of my colleagues want to, about reason one, because I think, if we have a debate around that and take a vote, the whole thing stands or falls. And I don't think without all the information we can actually make that decision. I think, the policies in regard to the rural locations are not exactly in aspect. There are other policies that we have within our local plan that say we will support rural businesses and communities, and we have to accept the fact that a lot of our farmland, if you go back 20 or 30 years ago, a lot of our farms in this area were mixed farms. They had arable and animals. The world's changed, and as the applicant said earlier, they're going over completely to arable, and you need very different buildings and facilities to do that. And there's quite a few people who have said, and you will have noticed yourself, years ago you had a Massey Ferguson chugging along with a 3-ton trailer. They're not doing that now. They're chugging along with 10, 15-ton trailers that are 20, 30 foot tall. You cannot run those in the existing buildings. So I think I would, encourage my colleagues here tonight to defer this and bring it back with all the information. I accept the fact that, we've not had an answer on the 2 bits, but we can't bring it back again and say, oh, it came in after the day when we know it's there. It's either that or we encourage the applicant to withdraw it and bring the whole thing back with all the information, which he may choose to do if, following on from our line on deferral if we can't bring the information back. But I do think, as I say, I'm not, as you know, I'm not quite as strong in my words as Councillor Butler, but I do think I'm very confused about it. And, and considering I've been on this panel for 20 years and a chairman for a large number of that, I really think it's a difficult position we're in here. And I'm, as I say, happy to support the deferral so that it comes back in a state that we can pick it up and run with, in the hope that the applicant will accept the fact that, the best way to deal with this is to take it out and bring it back in again with all the information. Thank you.
Councillor Davenport-Ray.
I actually have questions for officers. The first one is, have officers advised that the application be withdrawn? And the second is, if we're not accepting any amendments and the application is deferred, following that we receive advice from county that they are prepared to accept it with amendments, then where does that leave us? What does the deferral offer the applicant in ability to make any changes?
The planning officer originally dealing with this application is not with us tonight. That's Kevin Simpson is the officer. We're just checking the officer file, but normally it would be standard for the officer to advise the applicant to withdraw the application and then resubmit with the additional information as requested by the consultees. So we wouldn't invite additional information practically normally. It isn't unusual for an agent or an applicant, though, to go directly to the consultee that has actually raised an objection or requested additional information. That isn't unusual. Thank you, Chair.
There was a second part of my question. So if we are minded to defer, and that provides time for more consultation with the consultees, if that should lead to the need for amendments, is there still that restriction that no amendments could be made? So in fact, the deferral would not allow the applicant to make any amendments.
Just coming back on the first part, apparently we did offer a withdrawal on this application. The no amendments rule is basically about the application before us. So if the officer feels that the recommendation on the application is not to support because there's something missing on the application, then it wouldn't be that we would go back and reconsult on parts of the application that we thought were acceptable. So in this case, there was more than one thing that was outstanding with regards to the application. So therefore, we offered the applicant to withdraw the application and resubmit the additional information. Deferring an application extends the life of an application without an agreement with regards to an extension of time. So therefore, the applicant is quite within their rights to appeal non-determination in terms of the application. If he chooses to do so, that would be something for the applicant to decide. In relation to this application, the officer's view is there are more than one reason for refusal on this, so there are 3. So whilst I asked members in relation to conditions 2 and 3, is that the reason for refusal? Deferral. Just to be clear.
Councillor Goulson, what are your reasons for deferral?
Basically, as I said at the outset, I think we can overcome one with and see how that one goes, but we haven't got the relevant information to actually make a full determination. And the 2 bodies that we need that information forthcoming so that we can make a true determination. And that's my reason for deferral.
Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. If you'll permit me coming in again now that there's a proposal or more than one on the table and a rationale set out for deferral, I think it follows from certainly my earlier views as I shared and the further information that we've had and the discussion that's ensued with colleagues since. I think the approach for this panel to take that is consistent with our policies is to refuse it and invite the applicant, as we've already done, to resubmit an application that does have up-to-date and accurate hydraulic calculations for the flooding, that does have the full information required for the highway safety point. There would still be, on the current assessment, an issue around scale and impact on countryside, but they may or may not wish to make amendments on that point as well when submitting. But that's the approach consistent with our policy. Councillor Niche suggested an alternative interpretation of our policy that would see the no amendments rule as applying to, I think, amendments to the particular plan of a building as opposed to amendments to the application. And as I think we've heard, that the rule applies to the application. So I'll be voting against the deferral proposal. I'll be voting in favour if we get that far of the refusal, and I'll be very keen to see this before us again in a different and fuller form, so that we can actually give resolution to the applicant. But I don't think deferral helps. Thank you.
Right, I have 2 more speakers, and then we will make a decision on the deferral first. Councillor Mockball.
Thank you. I just wanted to get a question of clarification from Councillor Goulson, who said that we can overcome reason 1, and I just want to know What's your reason of how you overcome reason one?
Basically, we're here as members of a panel, and yes, they are guidelines, LP10, sorry. These are guidelines that we can work through, and at the end of the day, the two major parts for me is this has been presented with insufficient information for us to make a true determination. And that's what I'm stating here. We need a full set of information when it's presented to us so that we could make true determination. It might still be that it would be rejected, but we need to have the information in the first place.
And Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. I'm still somewhat unsure what Councillor Goulston is getting at here. I think you're referring to the highways and flooding issues. But the first reason, the landscaping, you're not saying that we don't have insufficient information to come to a determination on that. So you're saying then we do have sufficient information on. So we have a reason to either reject or accept this application, not to defer it. So I'm not sure your recommendation, your proposal is entirely making sense, but you have a seconder, so I'm sure we'll go to a vote on it, but it's not particularly clear to me.
Okay, could I just clarify with members that the reason for deferral is to consult again with the LFFA and the highways for them to come back? Do people agree? Okay. Okay, so we will vote for a deferral. And the reason for that deferral is that we will consult again with the Flood Authority and with the highways, All those in favour of deferral, can you please show your hands?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9.
And those against?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6.
Therefore, that has been carried and this will be deferred. We will just have a quick break at this point. Thank you very much. Now on item 3B on our agenda, and this is for an application in Huntingdon, and I will pass you over to our planning officer, Lewis Tomlinson, who will present this to us. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. So the next item is land rear of the former vicarage, Church Lane, Hertford, and the proposal is the erection of a dwelling and alteration of access. This application is referred to committee because the officer recommendation of refusal is contrary to the parish council recommendation of approval. So the application site is located on the southern edge of Hertford, close to River Ouse in Huntingdon. The site comprises of undeveloped land to the rear of a former vicarage, which itself fronts Longstaff Way. So just on my mouse here, former vicarage is here, and then this is the site in black that we're looking at. Access to the site is from Church Lane, single track carriageway. The main features on the site are existing mature trees, which cover the majority of the site. As I'll just go through the plans you can see, so we've got listed buildings. Just to the right, we've got the church and then some residential dwellings. So you can see on the screen in front of you is the TPO points. So you've got group TPOs and single TPOs on there. And then this is the flood map. So yeah, so just continue. So the broadleaf trees covered by a tree preservation order. The application site lies within Huntingdon Conservation Area, within the settings of All Saints Church, Grade 2 Star listed building, and 46 Church Lane, Grade 2 listed building. The majority of the application sites you can see on the map in front of you is in Flood Zone 1. However, there's a small area along the southern boundary of the site which is located within Flood Zone 2. So this is an aerial image of the site. The site is... Oh, if I just get my mouse in the right place, it's here where all the trees are. You've got listed buildings here and here. Zoomed in version, so you can see it's clearly outlined there. Again, you can see the amount of trees on the site. This is a photo looking at the site. Again, you can't see too much apart from trees. That's looking up Church Lane towards the church itself, which you can just see in the backgrounds of the photo. And that is looking the opposite way up towards where you go onto the main road. That is an existing tree survey plan, so you can see the amount of trees on the site. So the application seeks approval for the erection of a dwelling. And we'll just go through those proposed plans now. So yeah, if I just stay here, so that's the existing tree survey, and then you can see the proposed site plan. You can see a number of trees being removed as part of the proposal. You can see the dwelling there and the access point. This is a ground floor plan of the proposed dwelling, a first floor plan as well as the ground floor and roof plan. This is the elevation that would face at an angle towards the Church Lane. Side elevation, other side elevation, and then the rear elevation. So the main element would be 1.5 stories with accommodation and roof slope, 13.3 metres deep, with the highest element measuring 7.89 metres to the ridge. We have 2 single-story winds, one 14 and one 4 metre long. And the larger of the section would have a pitched roof and would incorporate a carport. The other one would be flat-roofed. That's the CGI 3D image that's been provided with the application. So this is from Church Lane looking in towards the site. You can see the dwelling just in the background. So members should note that there's been a previous application on the site for the erection of a dwelling. This was refused under delegated powers. So you can see the design on the screen in front of you. The refused dwelling is in a similar location to the proposed dwelling here. Main differences being the design of the dwelling itself. Obviously, that's much more of a two-story design across the whole dwelling. And then you can also see there's a detached garage, which is located away from any development that's proposed under this application, where this application has a carport instead. The two reasons for refusal on the application, one is to do with its design, form and scale, and the other is to do with the impact on the heritage assets. So the recommendation is minded to refuse for the following reasons. So officers have put on the same reasons as the previous applications. Both 1 and 2 are the same as the previously refused. So reason 1, visual impact. Proposed dwelling fails to respond positively to its surrounding context by virtue of its design, form and scale, resulting in visual prominence along Church Lane and harming the character and appearance of the area. And then reason 2, heritage. So the development of this site would harm and detract from the significance of the character and appearance of the Hertford Conservation Area. The site is the former land and garden of the Vicarage of Hertford and contributes to the conservation area not only for its aesthetic value, sorry, my brain's gone a bit tired, as an open green space, but also because of its evidential and historic values. The proposed dwelling is not considered to sustain the morphology of the conservation area. The proposals also harm the settings of nearby listed buildings, All Saints Church and 46 Church Lane, and the wear they experience within the context of Church Lane itself. So the conservation team have objected to the application on grounds that the proposal will result in harm to the heritage assets. The proposed design also incorporates large amounts of glazing, panelling and windows, particularly at high level and across the gables, a large balcony, an oversized chimney, and with various areas of paving and decking around the perimeter of the house, which would not be in keeping with the traditional character of the dwellings to the west. The trees also form an important character of the site and also for the conservation area. The proposal will result in a loss of a number of trees in order to create the access, driveway, and space to accommodate the proposed dwelling. This will open up views into the site and the dwelling will appear more prominent. The proposal also will result in the introduction of a large amount of hard standing to provide the required parking and turning space, and then all the domestic kind of ancillary structures that will come alongside a dwelling. It is considered that the introduction of modern style dwelling and built form in this location would appear as a prominent and intrusive modern feature within the street scene. And the introduction of a proposed dwelling, driveway, parking and turning area to the application site would blur this distinction, changing the character of the lane and losing the undeveloped nature of the lane and turning it into a formalised road of predominantly large modern dwellings. Full detailed assessment on the visual and heritage is in the report. That's just a quick summary. So you can see there's a bunch of images and plans on the screen in front of you. It's ones you've all seen so far, but just to point out, so top left, you can clearly see the amount of trees on the site, the amount of trees that would be removed to then open up space for all the dwelling and access. I think the CGI also reflects this, but obviously we can't rely on that completely because it's only a 3D image. And then if you look at the photos that are contained within the slide, you can see the undeveloped green nature of the site transition and its important contribution to the conservation area. So that covers reasons 1 and 2, which is visual and heritage impact. So reason 3 is the majority of the proposed external amenity area would be overshadowed by the existing trees and the proposed dwelling on the site. So you can see on the plan in front of you, the proposed external western patio area, which is the kind of the right-hand red circle area. That's mostly under tree canopy cover. I just, where's my mouse gone? So you can see here, you've got tree canopy cover coming over a large section of it. The rear garden area, which we've classed as a rear garden area, would also be mostly under tree canopy cover, would be overshadowed by the two-storey element of the development, because it's north, and also would be overshadowed by the trees. So therefore, there's a concern regarding potential overshadowing and the usability and how acceptable it would be of the external amenity area. Given that the majority of the site would be under tree canopy, there's very limited space for a private external amenity area that isn't overshadowed and would have a decent amount of daylight sunlight. Reason 4, which is internal amenities, insufficient information has been submitted to demonstrate the proposed dwelling would have acceptable levels of daylight and sunlight due to proximity of existing trees. So there's like we said, there's a large number of trees on the site. They're in quite close proximity to the dwelling. In the absence of a daylight sunlight assessment for the proposed dwelling, officers are not convinced that the proposed dwelling would receive an acceptable level of daylight sunlight for the future occupiers. There's also a number of north-facing windows, again in close proximity to trees. And then the final reason is the proximity of the proposed dwelling to the existing trees on the site and the impact upon the internal and external amenity for future occupiers may create pressure to remove further tree cover to improve the amenity for future occupiers. The trees have significant public visual amenity value and the retention and protection are essential. Any further removals may diminish the overall group amenity value and its contribution to the carroted area and the Huntingdon Conservation Area. I think, yeah, as outlined on the previous reasons, I think it's quite clear. So this is really around kind of the future pressure that may come about from allowing this dwelling on the site, and then how the future occupiers would want to improve the daylight sunlight either for the external amenity areas or the internal, which then may become very difficult for us to resist, given that we allowed a dwelling on the site. So that's kind of the overall reason, which wraps up the last two, but it's much more tree focused than the internal external amenity. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. For this particular application, we have 2 speakers. Our first speaker is an objector, Mr. Wright. If you would like to come and address us. You have 3 minutes in which to address the committee.
Thank you, Chair. I was rather late in coming forward to object this evening, so I'm grateful to the Chair and the committee for allowing me these 3 minutes to do so. I will cover 5 issues very quickly, each of them taking no more than 3/5 of a minute. The first one is, a very similar plan was already submitted in 2018. This is just a copy-paste with a few amendments to the 2018 plan. It was rejected in 2020, and really there's very little requirement to consider this again because it's already been considered and rejected based on the 2018 submission. The second point I would note is that and this has already been summarized very well by the planning officer, but this dwelling will be detrimental to the existing character and the aesthetic nature of Church Lane and the former vicarage. It's not in keeping with the area at all, which is a quiet rural lane between the river and a wooded area. The site we're talking about, together with the garden of the former vicarage, form a open wooded area that has a certain characteristic that will be spoiled by building this dwelling on it. The third point I'd like to make is that this is a conservation area. And that has to mean something. We cannot treat a conservation area in the same way we treat other areas. And the conservation area, in my understanding, is itself a non-listed heritage asset, the whole of the conservation area. So although there are certain listed heritage assets which you must pay attention to in the conservation area itself is a non-listed heritage asset. And I would argue that the former vicarage, which is not a listed building, but the former vicarage, which is now number 4 Longstaff Way, is also a non-listed heritage asset. And its garden, which is adjacent to this plot, and this plot itself should be considered in that way. So that's the conservation area. The third point I will make is there is extensive wildlife on this particular piece of land. It's a home to badgers, foxes, muntjac deer, grass snakes, and a range of others, not to mention ducks, squirrels, and countless birds and hedgehogs. And finally, the fifth point that I would make is the trees, and we've seen a plot of the trees, and these are very mature trees, which means firstly they are magnificent specimens. There is a lime tree there that is one of the finest you will see anywhere. Not on the plot itself, but in the adjacent garden, which is my garden, just to be clear. There is a cedar of Lebanon that is particularly fine, and although the dwelling has been designed to nestle in amongst those trees are very tall and very mature. And I think at some point there will be a conflict between conservation of the trees and safety to life, because those trees, particularly that lime tree, one day it will fall on that building. Or, it could do. And one tree did fall over on that site about 2 years ago. Not one of the really large ones, one of the smaller ones was blown down in high winds. And had there been a building there, it would have done substantial damage to the building. Now, I think to think that that dwelling can sit there under those trees and that those trees won't eventually get cut down for safety
Mr.
reasons.
Wright, we've gone well over the 3 minutes. Could you just round up with a sentence, please?
That was my final point. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
Are there any questions for this particular speaker? There are no questions, so thank you very much for addressing us.
Thank you.
Our next speaker for this particular application is Dr. Wickham, who is the agent. Welcome, and you have 3 minutes in which to address the committee. When you're ready, you can press the middle button.
Thank you. I'll try and be brief. The first point to make is, of course, that the Town Council is in favour of the application. And unlike the previous application, the Town Council was against that. The second point I want to make is that this application has been with the Council for 2 years. All was going well initially. In October 21, the then team leader, Ida Garnstrom, said there was no objections from the design officer, no objections from the tree officer, and indeed went further on the 1st of November, started to agree pre-commencement conditions with us. And as you well know, one only deals with commencement conditions if a matter is going forward in a favourable way. And then, on the 3rd of November, the subsequent team leader took over the case and wrote to me, "I have checked Ida's handover notes. I was excited to see that application reference had been written up favourably." Well, unfortunately, he was looking at a report on another application, so his enthusiasm was muted, and nothing happened. Then we learned that it's going to be refused. This is quite unacceptable conduct in my view. The urban design officer has no objection, the tree officer has no objection. The design of the house, contrary to what is said recently by the previous speaker, is totally different from the previous application and in a different position. The position was as agreed with the then conservation team. In terms of the daylight and sunlight, notwithstanding the fact that the application has been with the council for these 2 years, we haven't been asked for a daylight and sunlight report. We would have supplied one. It wasn't raised as a matter. If this goes to refusal, then that is a grounds for some considerable complaint, and I should certainly be making that. The NPPF, National Planning Policy Framework, at para 197C, records that new development can add interest to conservation areas. Ladies and gentlemen, Madam Chairman, you can't see the church from this spot. It's a distance away, you can't see it. Between this site and the church, which is of course a listed building, very important and accept all that, there are 3 1920s interwar houses of no distinction at all. This will add distinction and variety, and there's plenty of room to plant more trees between the site and the road anyway. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wickham. Are there any questions? Councillor Davenport-Ray.
So the application that's before us tonight is the second design for this site. And it's really a fascinating plot to me, both in terms of the history and the conservation area and the nature that's on the site. What are the design elements that are included in this design before us that reflect the historic nature of the site and the natural nature of the site?
Well, there's a great deal of timber. There's a limited amount of glazing, which is different from the first one. The carport is low rise timber to reflect the environment and to reflect the arboraceous character of the road. At the entrance to the road, there is property known as woodlands with trees all around it. We've taken that on board, and some of the best examples of good design take account of that sort of environment, and that's what we've done here. Go to woodlands. As far as I know, nobody's been killed and the trees haven't fallen down. Probably they quite like their trees around them at the entrance.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for this particular speaker? There are no other questions, so thank you for addressing us, Dr. Wickham. We will move on for questions of clarification for the officers. Are there any questions of clarification? Councillor Jordan.
If you could just put the plan up again and show us where the conservation area starts and where it ends. Because if you look at the character of that road, just down from there is a very modern house. And so your first thought was, is that in a conservation area? So I want to be very clear where it begins and where it ends. I thought it did, but I just want clarification of it. Yeah, I don't know what it's called. But it is a very modern house, and it looked that, I couldn't quite, I couldn't line it up with what was being asked just further down the road and that. I couldn't, I think you're right, I think it is called the White House, is it?
It's got a white wall in front and looks like a...
And so I was thinking, is that not in a conservation area? Thank you.
Through you, Chair. So I'll just start with this slide. So this shows the conservation area. It's not immediately clear, but you can just see there's a slight colour difference in kind of this area to the white up there. So it's all this kind of shaded pink. The dwelling you're talking about is this dwelling here, which is this one, which, yes, is of a more modern design. Especially in the report is referenced the change in character. So it's much more modern dwellings on this side of Church Lane. And this site acts as a transition to the more kind of rural village feel where the church is located towards this end. I think it's a point that this dwelling, yes, is of a modern design. It doesn't mean that the conservation team supported it. I don't know the full plan history. I haven't looked it up. I can have a quick look at some point while we're in the discussion. But I think we just need to focus on this site itself and the contribution that site makes to the conservation area. But yes, the report does acknowledge there is a difference in character either side of the site. One kind of more traditional rural village character and more modern as you go back towards the main road.
Thank you for that. But the houses opposite it, that modern, I know we're not talking about that one tonight, but we're talking about the area and the site and the conservation. So I'm trying to put it into perspective. they are timber built. They're wooden. They're old. They've been there for a number of years. That just stuck out like a sore thumb to me. It didn't match what we were being asked to look at. I don't know. It just didn't. I can't put it into words. I was just shocked when I went down there. And I know this site very well because obviously I live in the area, and so I thought that can't be in a conservation area, but it is. That's all one conservation area. Okay, fine. You've clarified that for me, and that's what I asked for. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Davenport-Ray.
Yes, thank you, Lewis. You've given us 5 proposed reasons for refusal, and 3, 4, and 5 all relate to trees. So can you just tell us again the feedback we've had from the tree officer? Because I think that might have changed over time. So as of now, with the application in front of us, what is the tree officer's advice?
Through you, Chair. So I think this is kind of acknowledgement of how long the application's been with us. The tree officer has since changed. The original tree officer assessed the proposal purely on what trees were being removed and what was being retained. And I think this is where there's a bit of a grey area between what the tree officer assesses and what the planning officer assesses. So the tree officer's looked at, okay, what trees are being removed, what quality are they, which ones are being retained, and has deemed the application to be acceptable on that basis, and has recommended a number of conditions to obviously protect the trees during construction and their retention. As a planning officer, we have to look further beyond the tree issues and have to look at internal amenity, external amenity, and then the potential pressure that may lead to remove further tree canopy. So I think kind of the starting point is the tree officer was happy with it on what was being removed and what was being retained. As a planning officer, we've looked at kind of more details beyond the trees, how the site's been used as a whole. And that's why I've broken down the reasons for refusal to make it very clear kind of on each issue. But yes, the tree officer did support the application based on what was being removed and what was being retained.
Are there any other questions of clarification for the planning officer? There are no more questions of clarification, so we will move on to the debate. Is there a councillor that wishes to start the debate for me? Councillor Dew, thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I have no wish to be here all night, so we'll start with this one. I think the application is relatively straightforward, and so is the response. It is in a conservation area, it is in a heavily wooded area, and I think we have to look at the various aspects that have come forward on it. One thing we always have to remember with conservation areas, and one of my colleagues has picked up on that, you sometimes get things that seem like there are anomalies in there, but you have to deal with what you've got. And nothing's pickled in aspic, and there is an opportunity on occasions for properties to come forward, but they have to be of the highest quality. Is one example, and we had one in Holywell a few years ago where there was some arguments about whether it was or not, but nonetheless it eventually went through. And when you've got the conservation area, you do have to make sure that you're dealing with it sympathetically. I think the point that's been made here is, and I think it's a good point, there's a difference between the tree officer looking at the individual trees and whether they're good specimens or not, and the conservation team and the planning officers saying how do they actually contribute to the whole of the conservation area as a whole. And I think the officers have got it absolutely right on this. I can't see anywhere they've got it wrong. I'm not going to make a proposal at this stage, but you can get a slant as to where I'm going with it, unless anyone really wants me to, in which case I'll tell you, I will make a proposal for refusal as per the conditions there, and then we've got something to work to. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much, Councillor Dew. Councillor Butler.
Thank you, Chairman. Yep, I'd like to second that. I think the officers have got this one right. They're more concerned, I feel, about what this site will become rather than probably what it is now. There's quite a few trees to be removed, and I think they've come to a very sensible decision where, as in, not wishing to go back, but on the previous application, the growth of trees and a seclusion would help the site. That the growth of the trees on this site will only cause harm in future years, I feel. So, as I say, I feel the officers have got this just right, and I'll second it. Thank you.
Thank you. I'll take that second. And I have two other councillors that wish to speak. So Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. I'll keep this brief as I agree with colleagues who've spoken and would have been happy to second, but Councillor Butler got there ahead of me. I would just, as the officer did a moment ago, would just acknowledge the inevitable frustration in an application that's been in the system this long, 2 years. As we touched on in the previous item, it is a situation that requires significant measures in order to seek to mitigate, and of course that is the only reason why we had the policy around non-consideration of amendments that caused frustration with respect to the earlier item this evening. But it is applications like this and frustration, as we heard very powerfully from the agent on behalf of the applicant, that we have had to adopt a policy that's a lesser evil. But I'm digressing because I agree with the arguments presented. The tree points are critical to consider in the round as opposed to the individual trees, because I struggle to see that it could be possible to build a dwelling in this location as proposed without that pressure to seek to pull more down, and indeed potential obligation on us to allow them on the various grounds that have been alluded to. So I will stop there and vote with the proposed refusal. Thank you.
Niche. I was just trying to help you out. I'm going to be brief as well, briefer than Councillor Wakeford, because totally agree with Councillor Butler there. Slightly disagree with Councillor Wakeford on some of the aspects of amendments. But I'd also say it's disappointing, and I have to say this because I say it to everyone, that when certain parishes or towns don't turn up, that they don't hear the debate sometimes, because sometimes by listening to the debates they understand where the rest of the planning goes to. So.
Fantastic, thank you. Councillor Tevlin.
Just a quick comment to say that I agree with the proposal for refusal. One thing about the trees, and I identified in the report, but not mentioned by the officer or anything, is the risk of subsidence when you're building so close to that level of sort of trees is something that really needs to be taken into consideration. I know this in my own ward area, and it's not mentioned here, but I would note that subsidence really is an issue and also should be taken into consideration. Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. The Town Council are actually present here this evening, but I'm not sure if word that they wish to address the meeting actually reached Tony and colleagues. I suspect it didn't, but they are interested in this.
Thank you. I'll just take one more, Councillor Davenport-Ray, and then we will go for a vote.
I don't think this application is quite as simple to decide as some of my colleagues do. I commiserate with the frustration that the applicant has given here. Tree officers hoping that fewer trees will be cut down, design officers hoping that there will be more space created for the building, sort of giving an almost impossible situation. And people can live in forests. People do live in forests. They buy the house because they don't mind being around the trees. And so I think we're going to have to find a way to be able to accommodate buildings like this through our planning laws. I'll leave it at that.
Thank you very much. I will go to our proposal of refusal, which was proposed by Councillor Dew and seconded by Councillor Butler. All those in favour of refusal, please raise your hand.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16.
So that's unanimous, so that is passed as a refusal. We will move on to item 3C on our agenda, which is an application in Bythorn and Keystone, and that will be presented by our planning officer, Lewis Tomlinson. And I will pass this over to you.
Thank you, Chair. So the next item is White Horse Cottage, Loop Road, Keyston, for the erection of a dwelling. This application is being heard tonight at committee because of the recommendation of refusal. It's contrary to the Parish Council recommendation of approval. The site comprises a plot of land to the east of White Horse Cottage. It has a wide frontage, tapering to the rear, contains outbuildings and a parking area. The site is located on the southern boundary of the village, though it's not the last property in this part of the village, as there's several dwellings and bungalows to the southeast of the site along Loop Road and the adjoining cul-de-sac known as the Park. The site is located within the Keyston Conservation Area. White Horse Cottage is an unlisted building which stands within the conservation area and adjacent to the Pheasant Public House, which is considered to be a non-designated heritage asset. The site is located within Flood Zone 1. So you can see the site in black on the screen in front of you. Let me just trace my... You can see the conservation area just in pink. And then that wraps around here. White Horse Cottage is this property here, and then the Pheasant Pub, which was referred to as being a non-designated heritage asset, is this one here. So just some information around what is a non-designated heritage asset. So they are buildings, monuments, sites, places, areas, or landscapes identified by plan-making bodies, such as ourselves, as having a degree of heritage significance meriting consideration in planning decisions, but which do not meet the criteria for designated heritage assets, such as listed buildings. How are non-designated heritage assets identified? So it is important that all non-designated heritage assets are clearly identified as such. In this context, it can be helpful for local planning authorities to keep a local list of non-designated heritage assets, incorporating any assets which are identified by neighbourhood planning bodies. HDC does not currently have a list, so the next paragraph applies to us. In some cases, local planning authorities may also identify non-designated heritage assets as part of the decision-making process on planning applications, similar to this one in front of you tonight. That's just a red line plan. This is an aerial image of the site. So as you can see, you've got some small outbuildings and a parking area. This is a photo looking towards the site. It's got White Horse Cottage just here. The site is behind here. You can just see the outline of the buildings with some trees on the site. And you can see this gate here, which leads to the parking area. That's looking from the left of the site, so you can see it's quite a green site with trees. And then this is from Pheasant, which is the pub. And then you can see in the background is White Horse Cottage, and to the left of that is the site. So the application seeks approval for the erection of a dwelling. The proposal includes the removal of the existing outbuildings on the site. It also includes provision of hard standard for 2 cars and a turning area. The development would use the existing access to the site. Just go through the proposed plans. So you can see the dwelling here. And you can see obviously the turning area and parking and access, rear garden here, and the removal of a number of trees to accommodate this dwelling, including the removal of the outbuildings on the site. The proposed dwelling would be a 2-bed, 1.5 storey with accommodation in the roof space. The proposed dwelling would have a ridge and eaves height of 6.1 and 3.1. You can see the elevations at the top. So the north elevation is the front elevation, which faces onto the front street scene. You can see the ground floor plan here, and you can see the first floor plan, which is accommodation in the roof space. Members should note the late reps report for this application, which responded to 2 points contained within an email sent by the applicant to members. The first point is about the fact that the site is brownfield land. Officers acknowledge that this is the case, but outlined that and outline how this does not automatically mean the erection of a dwelling on the site is acceptable. The second point was about how the proposal was amended following advice from an officer who has now left the authority. Notwithstanding that, the case officer has reviewed the application fully, considers proposals being unacceptable in line with the conservation team's objections and in terms of internal amenity for the future occupiers. So, that's a street scene. So you can see the dwelling just behind the trees. I'd argue that the trees aren't representative of what's actually on the site. You can see White Horse Cottage here, and then the one below is a side-on view. You can see White Horse Cottage just behind, dwelling here. So the recommendation is minded to refuse for the following reasons and subject to the outcome of the 21-day public consultation and to delegate the authority to the final decision to the Chief Planning Officer in consultation with Chair and Vice Chair. This application's been in for a while. We can't be certain that we did put up a site notice as per the regs, so we've had to do that, hence why the consultation's just overrunning. So, reason one, which is visual and heritage impact, the proposal by virtue of its poor design, scale and inappropriate siting would fail to preserve or enhance the character and appearance of the conservation area. So this is just kind of a number of plans and drawings I've put together. So the conservation team have objected to the application on grounds that the proposal will result in harm to the heritage assets, in this case, the Pheasant Pub, and also the conservation area. The site formed part of a transition from a built-up area to the open countryside to the rear. Officers acknowledged there are existing outbuildings on the site. However, these are of a minor outbuilding scale. The proposal also results in the removal of trees, which would further open up the views into the site and would make the proposed dwelling appear even more prominent. It's considered that the introduction of modern-style dwelling and built form in this location would appear as a prominent and intrusive modern feature within this historic group, in views from the Pheasant, from within the group itself, and from the junction of Village Green. In addition to that, the three-tier front glazing feature entrance, which would be full height to the eaves, which would not be in keeping with the character of the immediate properties. The modern design of the dwelling does not reflect the traditional style of the neighbouring properties. And then the introduction of new dwelling with kind of the further ancillary domestic elements would further erode the nature of the existing site and its contribution to the rural character of the village and the Pheasant and the historic group around it. Officers considered that the creation of one private residential dwelling, given that the proposal seeks permission for the creation of one private residential dwelling, officers do not consider that there's public benefits that would justify outweigh the harm that the proposed development would cause on identified heritage assets. So on the screen in front of us, you can see top right, front elevation, referred to as three-tier, full-height glazing. You can see in this street scene here, and also from the photos, that would be out of keeping with the traditional design of the dwellings. Looking at the aerial image on your bottom left, you can see this is a transition site from this kind of built-up area of these more historic dwellings to the open countryside to the rear. The use of the site itself is not residential. It's been used as parking and storage without plan permission, but through the passage of time. Therefore, this would significantly change the character, plus removal of the trees, further opening up the site. So reason two, insufficient information has been submitted to demonstrate a proposed dwelling would provide high quality future residential internal amenity standards for residents. In order to minimise its visual appearance, the proposal was reduced to 1.5 stories with accommodation in the roof space. However, it's unclear from the drawings whether the proposed units would meet the technical house standards, which are the nationally described space standards, and they kind of set a basic guideline for good amenity internally for future occupiers in terms of the amount of space for bedrooms, the amount of space per person in a dwelling, and the stories. No sections or floor space measurements have been provided. Officers are therefore not convinced that sufficient space to have acceptable internal living arrangements on the first floor accommodation. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. On this particular application, we have 3 speakers. Our first speaker is Councillor Cliff Spinks from Bythorn and Keyston Parish Council. Welcome. And when you're ready, please press the middle button. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman. As you're aware from the many documents, this application has been overlong in consideration. However, this prolonged gestation has allowed it to be considered by no less than 4 planning officers, all of whom have given it outline approval. It also has the approval of the District Councillor and has no objection from the Tree Officer, Ecology, Highways, and most importantly, residents. Therefore, I will concentrate on the objection from Conservation, a matter the Parish Council take most seriously. Contrary to the assertion made in the objection, the proposed building is of good design, professionally thought through and laid out. It is sympathetic to other village buildings of similar barn style, in particular the village hall. Its position geographically is sensitive to and does not restrict the outlook of other properties. Its modest mass will in no way adversely affect the ambience or general attractiveness of this area. Indeed, being built on a brownfield site, it will positively enhance the location, having previously housed a large sewage disposal unit and is now an eyesore despite previous. It most certainly will not detract in any fashion from the attractiveness or the outlook of the Pheasant Pub. This weak conservation objection makes comment about, quote, associated paraphernalia. This is frankly make weight to this thin conservation objection and has no substance. This is compounded by the adverse comment about the internal dimensions and aspects of the proposed property. From scrutiny, this is manifestly incorrect, as it meets all building statutes, and it is reprehensible that such an assertion is made to sway the judgment of us and you. In our small village, this attractive proposal would be a valuable addition to our housing stock, particularly as this is a much-needed starter home. The Parish Council believes this proposal stands on its own merits. However, there is a further dimension worthy of comment. In a village with few amenities, the Pheasant Pub is a most important social focus for residents. It has been refurbished at considerable time and cost by 4 families in the village. The construction and subsequent sale of this proposed new building will bring a modest return, being a starter home, but will provide much needed finance for the sustainment and future of the pub, a most important social consideration. In summary, this will be a valuable addition to the fabric of our village, and we commend the project to you and strongly recommend approval. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for this particular speaker? Councillor Wakeford.
Forgive me, I think this is more one for officers, but relevant while the speaker is with us. I think there was suggestion of support from was it the local district member, who I believe is Councillor Gray? Did I hear correctly? Yes. Have I missed that in the report, or is he up next?
No, he is up next, but we're reading something out. So, yes.
Then I will wait and listen. Thank you.
Councillor Nish.
Thank you, and thank you for waiting so long as well. I suppose you looked at the agenda and thought that won't take long before I'm on. So apologies on that one. Just from a parish council perspective, we're talking about the visual impact as you come in. What was the parish council's view of the visual impact of coming into the village from that direction? Because that's one of the criteria. If you could just elaborate on that a little bit for me.
Thank you, Councillor. That's a most important aspect, excuse the pun. What the conservation officers, in terms of visual aspect, and you can refer back to the plans that were previously shown, what the conservation hasn't mentioned that opposite the public house, if I'm the public house, and excuse my military logic, but immediately opposite in the 12 o'clock from the public house are already modern buildings, also in the 11 o'clock, none of which are being designed or built to the sympathetic design that this small building has been designed to. And they take in no way away from the attractiveness or ambience of that part of the village. So we do not believe, and I have to say we live with this, we do not believe the visual aspect will anyway be impaired, either in the outlook of the countryside or in the village itself. And conservation cuts in two ways. It's not just chocolate box aspects, which we do not think is affected, but conservation is also the long-term good, in this case, of the public house, which is affected by us being able to get finance into the public house or the pheasant holdings. So conservation cuts in many ways, and it's not, as I say, and I'm repeating myself, the chocolate box aspect, which does not in any way get affected. There are already modern buildings in that conservation area. It's not shown on this particular map. You would have to see it on the general aspect thing. Does that help? Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much for coming to speak to us. You mentioned the other dwellings in the village, but would you accept that this one is going to be on higher ground? And secondly, did I hear you correctly? And you said this is a starter home. So that would suggest to me that this is a modern style dwelling, which would not be in keeping with the other aspects of this area.
Thank you, Councillor. Starter homes don't have to be, by design, dull, or they can be imaginative and attractive. Indeed, I would argue that the more they are attractive, that is important for starter homes. No, it is just purely the size and scope of the house which makes it it's a two-bedroom dwelling, which can only be considered a starter home. Does that answer your question? Probably.
I think I had another question about that this would be on higher ground, though, than the existing dwellings.
The high ground, I'm not sure I would agree with you. It may be elevated by a metre or so. It's certainly the whole of that aspect of the village. You've been to the village of Short, of course, and you know the aspect of it. You do. Yeah. Well, you'll know that it is not actually on the highest aspect at all. The ground actually slopes away from it is at the highest point, no higher than the White Horse Cottage, but the actual physical mass, as you can see on the diagram, is much lower than the White Horse Cottage.
Thank you. And we have another question from Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair, and thank you for coming along to tonight's DMC meeting. I think you've answered to a degree what my question was going to be, the fact that the property, to me, doesn't appear to be on any higher ground than currently the White Cottages are on, and being the local member, I do know there's quite a lot of other barn-type developments within Keyston that this sort of shows, carries on that theme around the village. So what are your thoughts with regard to the design of this barn style and its blending in with the actual village?
Thanks, Councillor. And thank you for your comment about the height. If you look at the village, the nearest similar barn style of building is actually the village hall, which is about 150 metres away. It has exactly that type of glass fascia on it, and indeed that was one of the considerations when it was being designed. It is ironic, and it would be a leap of logic, that the other red brick buildings that have been already constructed in the conservation area before my time, while sensibly constructed, they do not have that sympathetic design that this new building has. So I actually think this is a better leap forward in the design of buildings in this conservation area, and it exactly reflects the character of the village.
Thank you. Are there any other questions for this particular?
Sorry, did that answer your question?
Yes, thank you very much.
Are there any other questions? There are no other questions, so thank you for coming along. Okay, we'll move on to the next speaker, which would be our District Ward Councillor, Councillor Jonathan Gray, and we have a statement that's going to be read out to us.
Yeah, this is a statement by Councillor Jonathan Gray. Fellow members, I apologise for not being able to be present or being able to present this representation in person. I am concerned that the recommendation before you to refuse this application is not being made correctly. It appears to me that a succession of planning officers have provided the applicant and the agent with advice on how to improve the original design in order to secure approval, which has been acted upon in good faith. Whilst the process was long and slow, that advice seems to me to be perfectly reasonable and harmonious with what I believe this council would want to achieve in a development in this setting. Now, after a 2-year journey, conservation seems to suddenly have either entered the arena for the first time or changed its mind. This late arrival is clearly frustrating, but I would suggest that we leave that to one side and judge this case on its merits, one that is, as you know, supported by the Parish Council. I am really struggling to connect the objections raised by the conservation team when I look at what is there now to what is proposed. This is not an overbearing building, and I personally think in design and scale it does respect its location, as well as the street scene and conservation area. It does so considerably better than the existing domestic buildings, hard standing and other things currently on the site. Yes, it may be an aspiration of that team to have even higher standards of design or materials, but what is before you is proportionate to what exists already in Keyston and many other conservation areas, and as already stated, is an improvement on where we are today. Conservation is, by its nature, a more subjective art than absolute science. I understand that the second reason for refusal around headroom is incorrect and meets all nationally required standards. I am not aware HDC has different standards to those. The applicant's agent can confirm this. I would urge members of the committee to think very carefully as you consider and vote on this application, and to ask yourselves whether you are completely confident that a planning inspector would support refusal in this instance. I am not personally convinced that they would. It seems to me that experienced planning officers have suggested amendments and improvements based on their professional judgment and in light of the consultees' responses, and that the applicant has responded positively to these. You see more of these go through the appeal process than I do, but I think that in this instance the recommendation is setting us up to incur financial cost, staff strain, and will ultimately fail. And so I would urge the committee to approve the application.
Thank you. We have one more speaker on this particular application, and that is Mr. Andrew Ford. Welcome. And you have 3 minutes in which to address the committee. And when you're ready, you can press the button.
There we go. Right, good evening. Our agent's on holiday, so I'm here instead. My name is Andrew Ford, and I'm a shareholder in Pheasant Holdings, a Keyston-based company with Keyston-connected shareholders. We're looking to develop this site for 2 reasons. Firstly, to improve the conservation area, and secondly, to secure the future of the Pheasant, our village pub. In 2020, in the pandemic, the Pheasant closed. We villagers formed the company having decided to buy the pub and keep it open, with a landlord operating tenant system. We duly bought the pub and upgraded it to today's standards. Along with the pub came this piece of land. This was used as the sewerage treatment area, with septic tanks, processing machinery and a couple of sheds. 2020 marked Keyston moving to a mains drain system, and so this area became redundant. The proposal is therefore to allow the land to be repurposed and brought back into use. Pre-application approval was given by HDC. We had submitted a design, and after consultation with the planning officer, we changed it to meet with the officer's requirement. We changed it to meet with the officer's requirements. A small, simple house echoing the size and position of the other two houses, and a traditional barn design of other properties in the village, notably the village hall nearby. Our planning consultant has confirmed that the bedrooms meet the technical housing standards. As planning officer Tom Gabriel wrote in his email of the 13th of January this year, I am satisfied with the proposed development and am minded to recommend approval. The next planning officer, Richard Saki, advised likewise on the 17th of March, so I'm perplexed as to why we are here. Regarding the second reason, the proceeds are going to be used to pay back the loans that were given by the original shareholders to upgrade the pub. We are trying to make the pub more viable. The lower the borrowings, lower is the cost of financing the borrowing, and this should work through to us to be able to sustain a lower rental income. Lower rent means the greater the chance that the pub will survive and remain open. The neighbours support the application, the parish council supports the application, our district councillor supports it, highways have no objection, neither do ecology or the tree officer. All these consultees are happy. I would ask now for your support. This is an opportunity for you to encourage and support a local pub, a small rural business in need of help. Times are hard enough already, and this development will go a long way to ensuring that the Pheasant remains open for the benefit of the village and the wider community. It brings a redundant area of land back into use. It will be a small, unobtrusive house. It will enhance the conservation area when the sewerage site did not. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Are there any questions for this particular speaker? There are no questions, so thank you very much for addressing us. We will move on to questions of clarification to our officer. Are there any questions of clarification? Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, my first question for clarification is why has this particular application come to us when we're still out to consultation and waiting for the responses to come back? So I'd like clarification as to why that has occurred.
Through you, Chair. When checking the applications before we bring them to committee, we do make sure that all the consultations are complete. In this case, when we checked in relation to the site notice, we believe that it has been put up on site, but we have no evidence on the file to say that that's happened. Therefore, to make sure that the application decision is sound, we reconsulted and put the site notice up on site.
So if that is the case, then we are then looking at this application too early because you haven't had all the time for the objectors or whatever to put any comments forward. So why has it come now until, I know you're saying that with regard to the sign, but surely we're seeing this too early.
Just for further clarification, all neighbour consultations were carried out. There's evidence on the file in respect of all consultations. So the neighbour consultations have been completed. We believe the fact that the site visit notice was put up is the evidence associated with that officers want to make sure is completely airtight. In terms of making a decision on the application, members can make a decision subject to the Chief Planning Officer and Chair's recommendations.
Thank you. Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you for what it's worth. That answer satisfies me on Councillor Gardner's question. We've approved applications on that basis before. This is belt and braces. It doesn't sound like there's realistic expectation. New consultees will come forward as a result of the site notice. We don't already know about it. My question is around the rationale presented for the sale, which I'm sure we will all find extremely compelling and would wish to support a community retain its pub in use, and that was put eloquently by the speaker. I just wonder if officers can clarify for us whether the social purpose of the project, the company that's been formed, and the intended proceeds from sale of the house are capable of being construed as material planning considerations before us. Thank you.
Through you, Chair. So I've just double checked the application. The submission doesn't contain that public benefit of kind of the evidence for the sale with the pub. It just doesn't talk about that type of public benefit. So we haven't addressed it in the report. We've clearly just made a statement in the report that says the public benefit from one private residential dwelling doesn't overcome the harm. So it's a question for members that after they've heard that from the applicant, and I can confirm that the Pheasant Holdings are the applicant and do own the land, that you may want to give more weight to that public benefit than the weight that we've afforded in the report based on it just being a provision of a dwelling. Obviously, we've written the report based on the information submitted and made that assessment on the such, but it is an important part of the assessment, especially when you're looking at conservation heritage issues. It's part of the Balancing Up Act. So, yeah, I can direct you to the actual paragraph. So there's a number of paragraphs you want to look at. So the legislation set out is in paragraph 7.18 to 7.22. But I think the key part is at the end of 7.20, where it says the NPPF goes on to state where development proposal will lead to less than substantial harm to the significance of a designated heritage asset, this harm should be weighed against the public benefits of the proposal, including securing its optimum viable use. And then I'll just direct you further on to 7.21. It says, furthermore, paragraph 203 of the NPPF states that the effect of an application on the significance of a non-designated heritage asset should be taken into account in determining the application. A balanced judgment will be required with having regard to the scale of any harm or loss and the significance of the heritage asset. Our local plan policy complies with this. So then the relevant part that I've just referred to of where we officers have made that judgment is on 7.35. We stated, based on the information submitted with the application, that given that the proposal seeks permission for the creation of one private residential dwelling, officers do not consider our public benefits that would justify or outweigh the harm the proposed development would cause on the identified heritage assets. So it's a matter for members to consider what they've just heard from the applicant and to weigh that up, whether that public benefit outweighs the harm that we've identified in the report as officers. I hope that's clear.
Thank you. I think that's extremely clear, and I dare say may have saved us some of what is left of our evening when we come to the next stage of debate. But I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Sanderson.
Thank you, Chair. My question is about paragraph 7.30, and the question I asked the representative from the parish council. So the site's on higher ground at the edge of the conservation area, and that will be more prominent within views of the conservation area. The representative from the parish council seemed to suggest that wasn't the case. Could we just clarify that point, please? Thank you.
Sorry, should have started with that. Let me just share my screen and I'll just show you on a plan. My understanding if we look at this plan here, my understanding of that 7.30, that the higher ground is this part. So I think it was, sorry, the parish council was correct in saying that the building itself, the proposed dwelling, does not sit higher than the adjacent existing buildings, but that land is still on higher land. So especially from views on Loop Road looking towards that land is at a higher point. The dwelling itself doesn't sit on higher land than the adjacent. I guess there's 2 points to that. Obviously, yes, there's more long distance views of the site, but you have to consider other views within the site. But yeah, I think 7.30 is referring to that. Yeah, that's my understanding.
Thank you. We will move on to Councillor Niche.
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Councillor Simonson, for asking that question as well, because when I had to revert myself to looking at Google Maps, because when I went there, I kept thinking it was the same height, but of course it isn't. It's the whole lot is, the side is actually slightly higher, but everything's slightly higher. It's just the road is lower, isn't it? But that's not that wasn't my main one. My main one goes back to really your concern on the first floor accommodation. Could you just clarify whether this is a known that it's wrong, or is it that building regs will deal with it? I thought it was a building regs issue when with heights, not a planning issue. I might be wrong. Usually am.
That's a free you, Chair. So it's a planning issue. So there are national space standards. Neighbouring authorities have taken them into their own policy. So therefore, there's an actual policy where you check it against. HCC doesn't have that, but it's a nationally recognised standard of good quality amenity. It's basically the bare minimum of what you should provide in terms of if you've got 2 people, how much space they should have. The minimum space for a bedroom, 7.5 for a single, and 11.5 for 2 bed spaces. So part of that, they also look at first floor accommodation in roof spaces. And part of that is looking at head heights. So making sure that there's a decent amount of head height for a usable percentage of the first floor. So you're not just relying on a narrow bit and then the roof sloping. You actually got a nice amount of space. So that's in 7.40. We're actually at, so it says any area with a headroom of less than 1.5 metres is not counted within the gross internal area unless used solely for storage. And that's when you consider the whole square footage or square meterage of the property when you're measuring it. The standards also state that the minimum floor to ceiling height is 2.3 metres for at least 75% of the area. We don't have any measurements, we don't have a section, therefore officers are unable to determine kind of the percentage there. So that reason for refusal, again, I know we've had a lot of discussions around insufficient information tonight, but we don't have the information with the application to determine whether they have what we would consider under national space standards an acceptable amounts of head height, yeah.
Councillor Gorton.
I think I've been jumped on by Councillor Nish. Mine was the same question, clarification around that, the dwelling size and so on like that, whereas the applicant believes that it meets all of the national described space standards. But I think you've answered that at the moment. Thank you.
Councillor Davenport-Ray.
In the report, there are 2 reasons for us to consider refusal. The first is around the conservation area. Having had a pretty good look at the character of description of the conservation area, I have lots of questions on that, but I'll save them for the conservation officer the next time I see them. But I think that's open to interpretation. Reason 2 is about the what we just talked about, the roof height. Are there any conditions, if we were minded to approve this application, that we could secure confidence that those dimensions has been achieved in the design?
Through you, Chair. So the answer is no. It's something we'd want to know that it's decent internal amenity for future occupiers. What would be condition is for them to provide information, and then if the information says it doesn't meet it, we're stuck in a situation where what do we do with that condition? So that's where we go back to the 6 tests of the condition, and it definitely wouldn't pass a good amount of those. So it's something that would require before determination. Yeah.
Thank you. And Councillor Wakeford?
Like Councillor Coulson, Councillor Davenport-Ray asked precisely my question. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any other questions of clarification? There are no other questions of clarification. So in that case, we will move on to the debate. Who would like to begin that discussion? Councillor Wakeford.
Thank you. I think that the report's an excellent one, and very grateful for what's been set out to us. I think as came across in earlier questions to officers, it is apparent that there is a public benefit as allowed for by the accurate and helpful guidance in the report that is in fact substantially greater than officers had appreciated, which for me enables us to address refusal point 1. I am distressed by the answer to Councillor Davenport-Ray's question a moment ago, because it sounds like my aspiration that therefore in the event the applicant's confidence about the extent to which the design does indeed comply with national standards, in the event that is accurate, that we might therefore approve this on condition of them producing data that allowed verification of that fact. Obviously, if it didn't, then they wouldn't meet the conditions in the application. But I hear that point is not soluble in that way. So for me, point 1, I think we can tackle. Point 2, I think we're still left with, but I'm very interested in colleagues' reflections on that. So I will listen to the rest of the debate. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Gardner.
Thank you very much, Chair. I'd just like clarification from an officer on a point that Councillor Wakeford has just made. If the committee was minded for approval tonight, and we asked the applicant to supply the information with regard to the heights that Councillor Davenport-Ray already has asked about, if they were if they were then approved to be correct, it would be the approval we could approve. If they were seen not to be correct, then it could be refused. Could you go down that line?
Through you, Chair. My advice to you is members, be careful. At the moment, you are assessing the application that is before you. The application is with the details as submitted as it is today. It's not reasonable to request that the applicant resubmits additional information. You are to assess the application before you. So I would urge caution in relation to looking at an application and trying to find things to make it acceptable when the information and the details are not with the application before you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Davenport-Ray.
I agree with Councillor Wakeford that the public benefit before us, given what extra information we've earned tonight, outweighs the impact on the conservation area. And so I was equally disappointed that we might not be able to condition the second reason for refusal. So I will second his proposal.
I
thought I heard, if he hasn't made one, then I will.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Wakeford, can I just check with you?
I didn't knowingly make a proposal, but it is late in the evening. Councillor Davenport-Ray indicated that she might make one. I wonder if she'd spell out what it was.
Right, Councillor Davenport-Ray.
I propose that we refuse the application on the grounds of point number 2 in the officer report.
Thank you. I'll accept that proposal.
Can I just come back on that point? The application before us has no information regards to public benefit that the planning officers have. So therefore, what you've heard today is not part of the planning application that we have before us. Therefore, there is a potential opportunity to resubmit an application with that additional information that would give for more clarity with regards to the application. So just on caution. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Corney.
Thank you, Chair. Just the first floor plan actually does show, and I think before I say that, actually, I mean, it's a great shame that there isn't a cut through on the drawings. I think, you know, it's a fairly fundamental thing on the drawing, to be fair, on any planning drawing. So I think, you know, the architect on this has sort of let the applicant down a bit. But equally, I think, you know, the fact that it's not been picked up by 4 officers equally, I think, lets the applicant down as well as us, all of us here this evening. But when you look at the first floor plan, there is a dotted line that goes through at the top of the staircase, and that's normally indicative of the point on a drawing where you can stand up. So, I think, you know, although we don't have a definitive number, we do have a drawing that does show us there's a reasonable amount of that first floor space that you can stand up in. But, you know, it doesn't get us over some of the other issues that are being mentioned, but I just felt that was something that wanted to be pointed out.
Thank you. I'll bring back in the planning officer.
Through you, Chair. So yes, acknowledge that that is on there, but we don't know where the finished floor levels are. So that's the key part to measuring the head height. We can make an assumption based on that, but we can't be certain. And I think that's quite key. Without that section, it's a standard thing that you'd expect with a dwelling, to be honest. But this is kind of that case where missing something like that, or similar to like the public benefits, is crucial parts of the assessments. We obviously can only assess what's in front of us. But yeah, we need a section to understand where the finished floor levels are.
Councillor G.
Yeah, I'm not going to prolong this too much. I think that my colleagues have it right. I mean, I think we're generally happy with the proposal on the site. We just need the information to confirm the head heights, and the only way that can be achieved is by refusing this and bringing it back with the right information next time. So the message is loud and clear. We're on side with this. We just need the information to deliver it. So I'll support the proposal that's there. Thank you.
Councillor Wakeford.
Forgive me, further to the helpful additional advice we had from our officer team, I wonder if Councillor Davenport-Ray would be content and Councillor Dew would support amending the proposed refusal to include both points on the paper in view of the fact that we are indeed considering the application before us, but the applicants has heard very clearly that as well as the section drawing, which I have no doubt from Councillor Corney's professional expertise will be able to show the information that we're looking for, but also spelling out that public benefit, which we've heard verbally but not set out, would be likely to take approval, potentially in light of the discussion we've had. Not that we can predetermine, but I think we do need to be refusing on both bases with the application here.
Councillor Davenport-Ray.
I'm happy to amend my proposal to, I propose that we refuse the application.
Thank you. And yeah, Councillor Dew, are you happy with that? Yeah. You did, yes. Okay, we'll move on to voting with this proposal, which is to refuse. Oh, Councillor Nish, did you want to?
Thank you, Chair, for indulging me, because I know you've already had a proposal and a second on this one. I just wanted to, because I know a lot of us are really minded on this one, and I think the applicant has been let down, and I think we need to be minded of that through a long-winded process that hasn't particularly worked. Is there no way that we can actually accept a condition, and I know you've already spelt it out, that to a minimum standard of, and then it's acceptable? Because surely if there's minimum standards and the condition is if this is built to a minimum standard of whatever it is that, 1.5 over whatever 75% 2.5, whatever it is just to clarify that we can't do that, because I think in some ways some of us are minded to approve it, but of course we're stuck with that other aspect.
Our planning officer.
Through you, Chair. So we might end up in a situation where, say, it doesn't comply, and then they have to increase the height of the dwelling. They have to change various design aspects. That's beyond what you should be doing under a condition. A condition should just be for further information or details. But what that condition could end up doing is causing the design of the dwelling to change to accommodate that. So it wouldn't meet the 6 tests. So we can't recommend that condition. Yeah.
Councillor Garden, just one last one, and then we will
Very
take a
brief.
vote.
Would we not be best then, on listening to what the officers have said, and what we did with regard to the first planning application that we listened to tonight for great length, would we not be better to defer this application so that the applicant is given time to provide that information to the officer? And if that is acceptable, I would like to put that proposition.
I just wonder if we keep doing this, then nearly all the applications that come forward, we're going to be deferring and we'll make no decisions. But I will bring in the planning officer.
Again, then, through you, Chair, I think we do need to assess the applications that are before us. This application has been in a considerable amount of time. We are trying desperately to get through the backlog of applications. The expediency of applications is quite crucial to the decision-making process. So whilst I hear Councillor Gardner's comments, the application before you doesn't meet the tests in relation to a condition. So therefore, I don't think it would be appropriate in this case to defer.
So we will move on to the proposal of refusal. All those in favour of refusal, please raise your hand.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11.
And those against?
1, 2, 3.
And any abstentions? 2.
2. Sorry. Thank you.
So that has been refused. We will move on to item 4 on our agenda, which is looking at our appeal decisions, and I will hand over to our planning service manager to report to us.
Thank you, Chair. Been a busy month in respect of appeals. We had 6 appeals. We had 6 appeals dismissed by the inspectorate. We had no award of costs. I draw members' attention to the Pure Fuels application, which was a public hearing. That was actually dismissed at appeal. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. So that brings us to the end of our meeting. Thank you, Lewis, for presenting those to us, and thank you for your support. And I will close the meeting.